Hello folks. Well, after my last video I was asked to do a video on humidity since we're still in the middle of winter, and I am particularly in a dry climate. I have to be very careful about keeping the humidity levels in the rooms where I store my instruments, and I've been doing it for years now. This is my savior. Let me just show you with the camera. This is my savior here. See it? That is a Vornado humidifier, and it has two 5-gallon tanks, so it's a 10-gallon tank humidifier. I'm not sure of the model number, I don't see it on there, but if you look up the Vornado 10-gallon tank humidifier, you'll see them quite available at all the retail outlets and eBay and other places. I used to do jam pits, I used to do sound hole humidifiers. You can buy them for $5–10 a piece. There are lots of different brands, some are better than others. They're a bit of a pain. It was okay if it's alright to use if you only have 1, 2, 3, 5 guitars. But when you have as many as I do, it just becomes you know, too high maintenance, always having to re-dampen those damp pits, those sound hole humidifiers, keep them damp. It's big maintenance, so I moved to a room humidifier. Now, my main instruments, the ones I keep in my studio, it's a small room. It's only about 15 by 15, and there are cedar panels on the wall which suck up the moisture. I have one of these 10-gallon Vornados in there. I keep it on medium, and it turns on and off when it reaches a certain temperature. And I just checked my hygrometer down there, and it's at 41%. Now ideally you want, say, 45%, but anything between 35 and 45 is fine. If you get down to 25, 20, then you can start seeing problems. Below that, your instruments can crack. So it's ideal to have it. Here I am in my big living room where I keep my guitars for sale on a rack, as you've probably seen in my videos, and I have one of these Vornados right next to it. Now, it doesn't do as good a job of keeping the whole room as humidified as the one in my smaller enclosed room, because this is more open. It's adjoining a kitchen and the doors to the backyard and the front door and everything else. So it's not as airtight, it's not as easy to maintain humidity. So this one I crank up to the high setting and leave it on all winter, and I basically have to change fill the tanks about every 4 or 5 days. During the wet season, I mean during the summer where it's more humid, I turn it down to low, and I think I have to fill up the tanks about every other week. So yeah, that's how I get by with it. It really works for me. I have another humidifier that's a smaller steam humidifier, but I tend to use that more for personal use. I have it up by my bed. It just helps me sleep better to have that humidified, what do you call it, steam? It's not really steam because it's not hot, is it? Vapor, there you go. It helps to have that. It helps me breathe more easily. You don't dry up in the night as much. So I don't tend to use that for instruments, although I do have 1 or 2 things up in my bedroom, and that probably helps. Another thing that I do is during the winter, particularly, and usually all year round, I normally keep my guitars in the cases and just have the ones out that I'm recording with or using, or maybe I'll have 1 or 2 that sit without cases as my go-to pickup fiddle around guitars. But I used to have, you know, my array of guitars on show at all times, For one thing, my room is too small. I can't display them all. And the second thing is I found that I didn't have as many problems if I just kept them in the cases and just took one or two out at a time. The biggest issue with humidity where I am is the fret ends. The fretboard shrinks and the fret ends start to stick out, and people just assume that, oh, that guitar was poorly made, they didn't do a good job, you know, setting up the guitar. That's not always the case. Wood can shrink and expand over time in different conditions, so this is something I constantly have to maintain. And because this is sitting by the humidifier, the fret ends are really nice. I did a fret end bevel when I first got this and set it up, but it's still nice. It hasn't shrunk because I keep the room humidified to about 40–45%. Maybe in this top room it's a bit closer to 38, sometimes 35, because I can't keep it as sealed. But yeah, it still feels good. I'm not having a shrinkage of the wood. It's doing its job. I've been doing this for a long time now, and I actually haven't had a guitar crack on me. I hear it happening to people all the time, but I've been lucky because I do these two things. A, I keep guitars in cases, and B, I run big room humidifiers. I have 3 of them in my house, so I keep the rooms where instruments are stored humidified. And you can see behind me I have a really nice Yamaha Cherry piano that is, you know, sort of a family heirloom, and you know, so the humidifier also helps with that as well, keeping that from drying out. And it's just great to have. You know, you have wooden furniture, you have cabinetry, you have I have an antique wood mirror hanging up over there, and you know, just having room humidifiers probably helps all those things. You know, that's just how I do it. It's not very scientific. So I've never actually had like a cracked top or a cracked back or the cracked side. I've been lucky. I've had guitars come to me with cracks that look dried out, but I've never actually had one crack on me because you know, I keep the humidity levels up, particularly in the winter when the heat's on. And here's the big issue. When I see dried out instruments that are damaged, it's not necessarily that they are exposed to the elements per se. Most people don't leave their guitars in their cars or have them outside too much. Normally it's because the guitars are too close to a heat source, like a heating vent. Now, I can't put my guitars somewhere in this room where they're not 6–8 foot away from a heat vent. There's just no way to do it, which is why I have the big tank Vornado running all the time, because when the heat kicks on, that moisture circulates with the heat and doesn't dry out the instruments. It keeps things humidified and moist. Also, another thing about the Vornado is not a vapor humidifier, so you don't see it. Sometimes those vapor ones are not good for instruments. I was at a guitar shop a couple of years ago, and they had about 5 of those vapor misty ones on in their acoustic room, and when I picked up an acoustic guitar there was a film of moisture on the guitar. Not good. Not good at all. You're going to get water damage, you're going to get warpage, you're going to get all kinds of problems with that. So it's almost better to have the non-vapor ones. They work great. You can't see the moisture, but you can feel it, you know. You know, that's just my take on things. Of course, you get also bellying issues when wood swells and dries up, so that can be an issue. I only had one of my guitars that had a belly issue. It was that Lies guitar that I did a video on some time back, the original Seagull, I think I called the video, and I managed to pull that sunken belly up. because what had happened, it had sunk and the braces had come undone under the top, which is another symptom of drying up. I rehumidified the guitar and then glued the braces up, and it came back together really nicely. And that's another thing you'll see a lot of videos on. You know, when you have guitars that are seriously damaged from drying out, what a lot of luthiers do is they put a cup of water or a sponge in the sound hole, and then they cover the sound hole and leave it for a couple of days. I do that as well. It normally brings a sunken belly back up, or at least some part way back up. It closes cracks if you have cracks due to drying out. Sometimes it can help the fretboard issues as well. But you know, it's a good question of Daniel to ask me. I think that's his name, because a lot of people don't do this. They don't humidify their instruments and they run into problems. And an area where I see it a lot, and this might surprise you, is warehouses. Seriously, warehouses. I buy guitars from vendors and people who sell a lot of them that are warehousing them. I just bought a lot of guitars from a seller the other day, and when I got it, they were so dried out that the rosewood fretboard was almost white because it was so dried out, and you could see the dry grain. You could see where it might start to crack, and you could see how the top was really dried out and starting to change a little bit, and the fret ends were really sharp. And I wrote to that vendor and I said, you know, you either need to humidify your warehouse or you need to get those guitars out of there, because they're not going to last much longer. One of them was starting to bow backwards because it was so dried out. It was starting to warp back from the string pressure, you know, and the dried fretboard was starting to back bow, as they call it. And so you got to watch out for these places, even when you buy guitars from Amazon and you know, lots of eBay sellers, particularly these Chinese sellers that warehouse their stuff and they just drop ship it to you. They don't open the box. You can tell that the tape's not being cut since it was warehoused in China or Indonesia or wherever it originally came from. So it's been, and some of them have American warehouses, so it gets shipped, it sits in another warehouse until it sells, which sometimes takes a while. And when you open the box, it's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. This is supposed to be a new guitar. It's dried out, it's starting to warp. The strings look like they're 20 years old because they've been sitting on the guitar for a long time. So a lot of times I have to humidify guitars when I buy them new, which might surprise you, but I'm sure those of you that buy a lot of guitars and collect a lot of guitars, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll buy from either used, you'll buy them from somebody who just didn't take care of them, or you'll buy them from a warehouse where there obviously is no humidity control and they're just dried out. The guitar that I set up, I think yesterday morning, it sucked up so much lemon oil on the fretboard because it was so dry. And I don't normally let guitars soak, as I did on my video where I talked about what I use on fretboards. I don't usually pour it on there and just let it soak. You normally put it on there and wipe it off. But in this particular occasion, I put the oil on and I let it sit for 5 minutes and let it really soak in. And then when I came back to wipe it off, there's nothing there. The wood had just sucked it in, just drunk it into the pores. And of course, when I did buff it out, it started to look like rosewood again. But this is all from somebody just not bothering to have any humidity control in their warehouse or storage area. So it's an important issue. Thanks very much for bringing it up. I hope it helps. Those of you who have lots of guitars, which I suspect is quite a few of you because guitar collectors tend to watch these types of videos, Get one of these Vornados with the 5-gallon tanks on each side, and I tell you, it's a lot less maintenance than having to change the tanks every day like on the smaller ones. And they're very clean, easy to use. They have a block filter in the bottom, which just slides in there. You change it every other month or something like that, and it's readily available. You can get a replacement. You can either buy a roll of it and just cut the block to fit in there. It just works just as well. So it's a really easy system. I like it a lot. They cost, I think, around 120, 140 new. I got mine for I think about $70 each from some guy. I bought 2 off of him. They were new in the box, but he was an overstock situation or something, and he was just getting rid of them. And I often see them on eBay for around that price, $70, $80, $90, and they're worth it. I mean, they save my guitars and make humidity maintenance a lot easier. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I'll see you next time.